Hello, it's the Dr. Dare Show live on Facebook and YouTube. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's Friday night, and we are here. We made it through another week. Thank God. Thank you for being here tonight, giving everybody a chance to come on. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We have an interesting topic tonight. Did you come from a toxic family? And we are going to discuss the seven toxic family systems, and it'll be interesting. You can kind of try to understand how your family dynamics impacted who you are today, and that's what we want to be talking about tonight. But when you come in, click hello. Hey, Kelly, tell us how your week has been and how things are going. You shine bright, Kelly. Whew, I am chilly for some reason. Oh my gosh. How was your week, Kelly? Um, Nicole Kelly. Yeah, so we have an interesting topic. There's seven types of toxic family systems that are out there, and we're going to break them down in an interesting way. Hope you grab your pen, your paper, your notes so that you can take notes. But when you come in, click like, click share, and let us know how your week has been. I am freezing. Ah, yes. So, what's new in the news today? Everything you got. And don't forget to share and like this video. It's going to be some good information. I started my PC classes today. Been overwhelmed, but grateful and blessed. How are you? Oh, good. That's exciting, Kelly. It's going to be a lot, but you got it. You got it. You can do it. I am good. I've been busy. A lot of clients this week, late night clients. Working on some projects, trying to get some things done and situated since in the year is just moving kind of fast and by. Yeah, but good, 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 good. So you have that class throughout the whole weekend, right? Throughout the whole weekend, I think you mentioned. My God, is the air on? Welcome, 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 y'all, to the Dr. Dare Show. Tonight, we are talking about did you come from a toxic family? We are going to talk about the seven traits that, hey, Karen, the seven traits uh, in a family system. So grab your pen and paper so that you can identify some of these things. Of course, I have a video that kind of explains it and breaks it down, but we're going to break that video down a little different today, um, just because I want everybody to uh, understand the information that's coming across. You're in a glass box over there, a glass box. I feel cold for some reason. Yeah, yeah, yeah. A glass box. Oh, hey Karen, how was your week? I know we just saw each other. Um, how can someone who's not your friend on Facebook can see your page? You must not have. I know there's some settings that if you allow pictures and things, the windows. So I don't know. Um, the yeah, you can allow people to see your pictures and stuff, or you can keep them private or keep your page private. So you probably have to look at your settings, because usually if they're not your friend, they can only see a couple of pictures, maybe a few things like that. But yeah, you have to look at your settings for that. But welcome, excuse me, welcome, welcome, welcome everybody that is on. Thank you for taking your time out to be here on a Friday night to talk about toxic families. You know, when we think of family, most of us think of, oh, we all love each other, everything goes smooth all the time, and, nothing goes wrong. but sometimes we're in a toxic family system and we don't know. Um, the link I shared. Hey, Tanisha, it shows your name this time. How are you? Kelly, you said a friend of yours can't see the link I shared. Um, you probably have to put it on, just put it on their page. You're trying to share this link? Tanisha, how was your week? I seen you Monday, but how's your week been since then? Oh, yeah, so interesting topic tonight. It really, 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 really is. I found this video. I always work from a family system. I swallowed. I always work from a family system perspective, meaning that I believe everything and all the things, the way I can't talk, the way that we get a lot of our things, our behavior patterns, and all of those things from our families. And this script, these 7 things that we're going to talk about, kind of highlights that. Tanisha, you said you had a busy week. Yeah, it sounds like everybody has been swim, but it's over. Yes, 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 yes. It is Friday night. Okay. So yeah, I believe that we all, something in our family, we all learn all the things that we know about ourselves from our family. And so this session tonight, not a session, but show tonight, um, is going to talk about family systems. And when I say system, that means the family is a system. Like it works together. It functions together. And if something is broken in the system, then it can cause something to be broken in the person who's in the system. And so that's why we're describing it. So our question is going to be, did you come from a toxic family? And then we will discuss the 7 types of toxic family systems um, based on a video. Any questions before we start? Before we start. But like I said, we all come from different backgrounds and our families. Doesn't mean that because you recognize one of these traits that it, you know, you're a bad person or anything like that. But we do pick up a lot of our traits that we have from our family system. And so that's what this topic about. So we'll start with number one. Well, we got 2 minutes before 8:40 is usually when I start. But anything interesting happened out there? I don't know about y'all, but it seems like people are just dying left and right on social media. I don't know what is going on. Mm, 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 mm. Oh, oh, okay. So yeah, sorry, I got distracted. So let's get started. It's 8:40. I have noticed so many deaths recently as well. I don't know what's going on. Yeah, it's a lot, a lot. It's kind of scary. Um, yeah. Okay. So let's start our first um trait that we're going to be talking about is called looks good on paper. Our first topic, our first toxic family trait is called looks good on paper, right? Hey, Angela, I just got your text. Glad you're here, but if you don't feel well, but glad you're here. Um, yeah, so the first um toxic family trait is called looks good on paper. And so I'm going to let the video talk about that and then we'll discuss it and then we'll go to the next one. Okay, so.
good on paper. Incidentally, these are just random numbers. It's not leveled in severity or anything like that. You may have heard that term before, looks good on paper. This family's major focus is controlling image and avoiding feelings at all cost. Feelings like shame, problems with the kids, problems in the marriage. This family does not do feelings. In fact, I think more energy goes into covering up feelings than the energy that it would actually simply take to address them. Some traits and examples. Inauthenticity that other people in the community don't pick up on, meaning that the family is seen as like super legit, super has it together. People don't notice the dysfunction underneath. A family like this can be meticulous about the yard, but they will cover things up like a really unhappy marriage. There's a lot of energy that goes into covering up messy things in the family, like teenagers acting out. No one talks about the drunk uncle or the affair, so there's lots of sort of secrets, lots of sort of pretending or putting things away. Values, this is big. Values are usually heavily rooted in one's station in life. Going to the right school, becoming a doctor, looking perfect dress wise, image and status. There can also be a vibe of like looking down upon mediocre sort of professions, mediocre schools, artists, looking down upon the secular, looking down upon the non-secular. It just doesn't matter. This tends to be from an affluent sort of dynamic, an affluent family, but it doesn't mean that it can't come from lower economic statuses, and sort of like all types of families can be trying to look good on paper. This family also sort of perceives having problems as weakness, which is a big one. I often think about the parents of this family. They want to be seen as like contributing members of society, or they want to seem like good church people, but their inner life can be a disaster. This kind of system is really confusing and oppressive from the place of pressure on kids to perform and to look certain ways. And no one does feelings, and it's pretty rigid. Kids in these families really struggle with their own identity and maybe spontaneity. They can also struggle later in life with authenticity and being true to themselves. Kids, like I think about teenagers growing up in this, or late teenagers, is like if they don't get into the right school, they can become suicidal. If they make mistakes, they can get into a major depression where the stakes are so high in a family like this, which is pretty bad. Adults who grow up coming from a family system like this may potentially struggle with perfectionism, authenticity, like I mentioned, disappointing others, a bit of emptiness in a way that they may think that becoming top tier doctor is going to make them sort of happy, but there's a chasing of things, comparing themselves to others, and maybe not knowing how to have fun. The thing to maybe process in your recovery, if you grew up in a family system like this, is how things were so conditional and how the adults were totally focused on the wrong things. That's one piece in therapy that I'm probably going to be discussing with a client who grew up in a family system like that. So that's number 7. Number 6 is what I call ships in.
So did everybody get that? That one is called Looks Good on Paper. This family is just everything is about the looks and how it looks on the outside. But there's so much negativity going on inside of the house. I remember kids being like that, that they had to go to a certain school, they had to be a certain way. I could see that happening too, as far as church goes, the black church especially, where everything has to look good on the outside when you go to church, even though the home may be kind of chaotic and everything is not going in that way. Do y'all know anybody that grew up with this type of, or does anybody recognize this type of family system where it looks good on paper, but it's so much stuff going on in the background? And keep in mind that you could experience multiple, you could have multiple symptoms of one of these 7. So that's the first one. Um, Chime in when you want to. We're going to number 2, and we're going to be talking about the next one, which is ships in the night.
In the night. This is really a family that is centered upon neglect and disconnection connection when it comes to connecting as a couple and then connecting as a family. And incidentally, through these examples, guys, I'm just giving heterosexual examples. It can be applicable to anything, it can be applicable to same-sex marriages. Try not to look at these from such a concrete lens. I'm open to whatever your experience was. So ships in the night. Here are some examples. Kids go to boarding school or they stay with other family and there's not connection. The parents seem to be living separate lives as if they were playing house still. Parents are more engaged in work, their own friendships outside of the family, or have secret lives rather than be invested in their own marriage and their own children. Children might be raised by grandparents. They may get more parenting from their friends' parents. And there's a deep sadness to this system because it's like no one knows how to connect. Children can feel like the parents are actual strangers, that much lack of connection, or they have a vibe like that. I also think about maybe like one parent is working 6 months out of the year, and then that parent becomes sort of a stranger to the children. In adulthood, for those coming from a family system like this, they're most likely going to struggle with intimacy on several levels.
Oh my.
Also, someone coming from this family system will also probably struggle with feeling like they're always on the outside of things. And later, if they get married or have friendships, they may see their partner or their partner's family interact from a place of intimacy, and it's like super foreign to them. Lastly, being neglected is very familiar to someone who comes from a family system like this, and they might have a really low bar about what to expect from others. The thing to process with coming from a family system like this in your own healing journey or in therapy or whatever is to hold the parents accountable for being so checked out and that they were just going through the motions of kind of having a family without actually cultivating having a family. There's a big difference between those two things. I think about it like a non-child-centered house. So moving on. So that was that. Number 5 is what I call
Okay, so we've discussed two. The first one was looks good on paper. That's when the family puts on this air that everything is good on the outside. Anybody that would look at this family, they would think everything was going good, but inside nobody was really connected. The second one was ships in the night, where both parents are both working. Nobody's ever connecting with each other, and it just seems like ships in the night. Everybody's just in the house, but nobody's really connecting at all. And as you could hear, he was saying how it creates its intimacy issues that adult may not understand. If they met somebody and they saw this their family just connecting, they may not understand that type of connection. So then they accuse, you know, I've heard this before. I've heard a husband accuse a wife of messing around with her brother because they were just that close. But what that is showing is that you didn't come from a house. You came from a house that probably had the two ships in the night. Let's go to the next one. And Karen said she recognizes this type of family system looks good on paper. We call it keeping up with appearances. Yes, and that's exactly what people are doing. Let's go to the next one.
this one's big. It's what I call the anti-love family. This one's hard. As messed up as my own childhood was, my mother was able to be loving and affectionate when we were small, when she was sober, or when she was home. She expressed love and was affectionate, but she actually didn't have the behavior to back that sentiment up as sort of a healthy mom. The anti-love family is in a total deficit of affection, appreciation, warmth, camaraderie, and it's sadly and horrifically rooted in contempt and disgust for some, if not all, the family members. So children are just the recipients of such contempt from their parents. There's a marked purposeful like nastiness due to the parents being either mentally ill or having loads of self-hate themselves going on, or a lot of their own unresolved trauma. And the family like acts out from a place of deep bitterness. Some traits. You're bullied at school, you come home and the message is, what do you want me to do about it?
Yeah.
That's that contempt. Vulnerability in a family like this is usually made fun of if you're vulnerable or if you're sensitive or if you're in trouble. They get entertainment out of that. Um, Sentiments like you don't need any help, your life is perfect, like that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
There can also be sort of a sadistic enjoyment when someone is failing or needs help. Parents in these systems are really off about their responsibility about raising children. They are totally narcissistically removed from that concept. And there's a sick message in a family like this. It's like, if I'm miserable,
You're
you're
gonna
going to
be
be
miserable.
miserable, which is it's just pretty nasty. Children grow up in this heartbreak, and some of them become cold themselves, or some of them become painfully sensitive because growing up with a family like this, things are made to be so personal. Even if you're born highly sensitive, it's like super personal in a family system like this. And adults who grow up like this usually struggle with expecting similar treatment from friends and partnerships and bosses. That's what I mean by that. They are also usually confused with kindness. Someone who comes from a family system like this and really struggle taking in that they're lovable, because that would spark off a lot of grief about what it was actually like. So the thing to process this, the recovery idea or the thing to work on in therapy, is the betrayal of love and responsibility by holding the parents accountable for having their for not doing anything about their own highly toxic stuff. The person would have to also spend some time trying to buy into the concept of love and that they're lovable. And what I mean about that first part is, growing up in a family system like this is like, there's really, the betrayal of like, yeah, I'm your mom, but I also have contempt and disgust for you. Like, that's a betrayal,
Wow.
and holding the parents accountable for that they caused that. That's what I mean. Moving on, number 4 is what I call the chaos system. This is children just growing up in severe chaos and the parents being sort of like high chaotic themselves. There could be multiple moves. There could be parents getting divorced and back together several times. There could be severe poverty or survival mode. There could be multiple affairs. There could be high drama amongst the adults up top. Like dad moves out on a Tuesday and he's back in the home on Thursday.
Mm.
In a system like this, there can be a lot of broken promises, and the family is weirdly familiar with the fast moving chaotic changes, so much that they assume that that's kind of how life is. It can also be domestically chaotic. What I see, it's sad, but it's like a total loss of basics for children, such as like clean laundry, stable consistent schooling, stable food, basic needs. And it's sad that often the children in a system like this are treated as almost like pets. Like, once the parents feel like food and shelter is established, that's all you need.
Wow.
Children will struggle with shame, and they will try to start to get their needs met, like from other people, like from friends and teachers, and that's a very shameful experience to put a child up to because things are so chaotic at home. What it's like for having for adult clients who grow up in this is, I often have clients who grow up with addicts, and or where they were in the military and they were moved around a lot. They might struggle. I know that this sounds weird. Is that adults who grow up like this may struggle with moving into an apartment and actually unpacking, because sort of establishing themselves or establishing an apartment is something that they don't necessarily know how to do because they're so familiar with. It's like, later for that, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah,
It's
let me
not
just
that
move.
important. Survival is important. Disassociation is a common one, which makes a lot of sense to me because these children aren't helped with catching up from one chaotic thing to the next. There's not parenting around that. And my clients who grow up on this often need to do work around belonging to a group or a place or in a partnership or something. They're also usually fiercely independent due to the shame for having grown up in this, um, which is a way to protect themselves. They are still, it's interesting, that client that comes into me who grew up like this, they're still sort of an emotionally in transit. And it's really good for them to process about what got lost for them sort of along the way in a childhood like that. Clients growing up in this can be highly intense about cleanliness or money or lack
Mm.
or stability or expectations, or they may deeply struggle with organization themselves. They may literally not know how to clean up or be organized. The thing to maybe process with this in your healing journey or in therapy is grieving about the lack of stability and consistency while holding the parents accountable for being so loose with the child's development. So, number 3 is toxic divorce slash loyalty. This is another common one. I'm not saying divorces are toxic. I actually think divorces are good modeling for children if a relationship isn't working out. What
Hmm.
I'm saying is if the children aren't helped in that process, if there's bitterness and nastiness and poor co-parenting and resentments and mess, that's when it becomes toxic. So that's what I mean. Some examples are, and this is a big one, usually up front in my mind, is the concept of parent alienation, where kids are sort of brainwashed about one parent due to the other parent being very vindictive or mentally off. So there's really like a character assassination of one parent over the other. Um, there can also be step parents in the mix who are introduced. It's really painful and horrific that kids will go through a nasty divorce and shortly after a step parent is introduced to one or parent, and that there's even now more abuse because that step parent is toxic. There could also be that it's simply that there was no processing of the divorce at all. It doesn't have to be sort of nasty co-parenting or anything, but there's just no discussion. It's a little bit like, well, dad's moving out, we're moving on. Who wants to go to Chuck E. Cheese? And it's a surreal experience that no one is processing this big, huge life event. Children in these scenarios are often asked to choose sides.
Hmm.
Sometimes directly and verbatim, or sometimes that's super indirect, like through parent alienation. Even if a step parent is a good person, kids feel like they're betraying their biological parents by establishing a relationship with the step. And kids also absorb the vibes of, say, a bitter parent, because children are heart based and they will absorb the resentment of this parent as a way to ally with them and to sort of take care of them. And what the cost is the relationship with the other parent is greatly compromised because of that. So it's really important for co-parents and divorced parents to not talk poorly about the
The
other
other
parent.
parent.
Like, hopefully we know that more now. In adulthood, people who come from this family system are most likely going to struggle with trust and intimacy.
Mm.
They are going to have issues about not feeling protected. Like, dad marries an evil stepmom and they're not protective. That's where that sort of triggering and accountability and rage comes from, which might go on our partners, as I mentioned in other videos. And they like the idea of thoughtless and oblivious. There's a great example about that, of having issues with being for trigger issues around people who are thoughtless and oblivious if you come from a family system like this, or actually any of these family systems. Adults who come from these systems like this also really struggle with taking sides.
Mm.
They may also have like a big body reaction if there's conflict, even if they're not involved in that conflict. A classic thing is like coworker A and B, they're having a fight, and if you're a child of divorce, that can really unravel you, even though it doesn't involve you. Our inner children may secretly feel deep down, this is a big issue that I talk about with my clients, that loving relationships are sort of a lie, that healthy marriages aren't really true. And given their experience, you
Mm.
can sort of see why. But I also sort of teach my clients to
Okay, so I want to address some questions I see. Thank you, Angela, for your two. Let's go back and see what those were. So Angela says, I've seen the ships in the night as a child and teenager. Everyone's so busy with their schedules, wouldn't give us the proper attention, only when they had time. Thank you for sharing that, Angela. So how did that make you feel as a child, and how do you think that impacts your adulthood? And I can see where, like, with this type of environment, if you, as an adult, if you felt like everybody was just chaotic and you felt like you wouldn't get heard, you could get frustrated easily when you feel like people are leaving you out or things like that. And then Angela brought up another one. She says toxic divorce. um what I seen was, if it doesn't work, just move into another marriage right away. um do you think that was a good thing, Angela, or a bad thing? What I see as when I work with children of divorce is that they suffer a lot of depression. They do try to put one parent against the other. They're constantly seeking like love and love for themselves, because I guess sometimes when that divorce happens, it can leave them feeling like, not worthy or anything like that. But so far, if you just joined, we talked about five different types of family systems. The first one was looks good on paper. That family kind of just pretends everything is good, makes everybody in the community feel like they are the perfect family. The goal for that family system is perfection. Then the second one, which is what Angela talked about, is ships in the night. That means everybody is so busy, the parents are so busy, they're not talking to each other. Everybody in the house is just busy doing their own things. And then the third one was anti love family, where there's no love being shared, no emotions being shared. Everybody is just kind of like his example that he gave is that you can't be vulnerable in a family that has anti love, because they're going to either make fun of you, make you feel like that's awkward. That's why I think a lot of times in therapy sessions, I come across people who could barely say I love you to their spouse. It's so awkward. It feels so weird to them that they can't say it, and some of them can't do it. So then their partner is like, "Well, do you really love me?" And so that anti-love family, I see that a lot. If I'm looking at all of these, that anti-family one is a big one. And then one Angela mentioned also is the chaos system, where everything is so chaotic. There's multiple divorces. There's different men and women coming in and out the house. And what he was saying, that creates some kind of shame in the child and the adult when you grow up, because you're seeing all of this interactions going on in the family. So those are the ones we talked about so far. So if you just joined, we talked about looks good on paper, ships in the night, anti-love family, a chaotic system, and toxic divorce. And that when a child grows up in a toxic divorce, he was saying that they, as an adult, they don't have a lot of trust, and they struggle with intimacy as well. And so we got some more comments down here. uh, Karen says, I saw the same thing, Angela. Ships in the night, both parents working two jobs or working different shifts, children lacking attention in the home. Yes, and then Angela says, looking good on paper. My experience with that is we can be dysfunctional, but we still have to accomplish goals, school, etc. We don't talk about whatever happened that particular day or whatever. And I see that in a lot of families. Like I was saying, a lot of families, they want you to be quiet about stuff that happened in the family. Especially like if you are a church family and you go to church and things are happening in your family, you do not talk about this. We are supposed to look perfect. You better not bring any of the family stuff out of that house into the public. And I think that's why a lot of families, especially African American families or people of color families, struggle with going to therapy, because we're kind of taught that that looks good on paper, and we have to look good on paper. You cannot take your dirty laundry and air it out into the public, and that's only hurting the family members, because you grow up as an adult and you don't know how to process your emotions. You don't know how to process stress. You don't know how to process any of those things. So I don't know if any of y'all recognize your families in these, some of the characteristics of your family. Um, yeah, so there's multiple. There's little bits and pieces. Let me see. Somebody else making comments. Uh, and the toxic. Angela says, and the toxic divorce taught me that I have to process a divorce. Yes, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one thing he said is that if you had a divorce in your family, y'all need to process. Everybody needs to process that divorce. And I see it so many times in the adults that come into session. The divorce happened when they were children, but it still impacts their adulthood. And until they get to therapy and we start talking about things and they realize how much it did impact them. Um, and then Angela says, I self taught myself a lot about being healthy. Good, good. Because what I see is a lot of people don't even realize that any little thing that happened in childhood and it was negative for you could actually impact the way you are as an adult. Good stuff. And then Karen says, toxic divorce. I saw a lot of marriages where they never got divorced. Their parents lived separate households. One of one of both of the parents has another relationship somewhere else, and everyone knows. Yeah, that's a lot of, see right there, I'm looking at that. That's a chaotic system that is looks good on paper because they're keeping it all hush hush, ships in the night. So all of them are kind of intertwined. And then Nicole Kelly says she sees a lot of some of stuff that she grew up with in some of these descriptions. And like I know he didn't say this yet, but there you could have bits and pieces of each one of these attributes. And so if you're just joining, I'm going to go back through it real quick, and then I'm going to address Pat's question. So we're talking about toxic family systems. The first one we talked about was looks good on paper. That means that type of family is just making, like Karen says, making a good appearance for the outside world, but there's so much stuff, negativity going on behind the scenes. And then number two was ships in the night. That's where like the parents, they're working so many long hours that they're not even seeing each other. The household is kind of being ran automatically. Nobody's really connecting. There's no emotions being shared. And then that leads me to number three. Sound like I'm doing my video, is anti-love family. That's where no love is being expressed in that family. Like you can't be vulnerable. You can't show any type of emotion, or you will get ridiculed or laughed at, or all of those things. And then the chaos system is just, you got different men coming in the house every week, a different woman coming in the house every week, divorces, getting married, divorce, getting married, and all of that creates a lot of shame and trust and all of those things. In the toxic divorce and loyalty type of system, that creates a lot of trust issues and intimacy issues, and just learning how to function as far as an adult. There's a lot of dysfunction in the way you look at people when they're interacting, because you've never seen a healthy relationship and you don't know what that looks like. And so Pat says, I grew up in a toxic single parent household. All her stress was passed on to us, my siblings. Yes, and I see that a lot in therapy sessions. And actually, Pat, that's one of the um, toxic systems that he's going to present in a few. Um, so thanks for bringing that up. And then Angela says dysfunctional family can be successful, but a lot of drama. And yes, you can. You can. This is why I do these shows, because I want people to understand like where you came from and how it actually impacts who you are as an adult. And usually it starts in childhood, and you've probably experienced some of these or all of these things and thought, "Hey, once I get older, I'll never think about those things." But it actually impacts the way you view things. It impacts your perception, the way you see things. Like an argument could be happening, you could be having a flashback that's similar to the divorce that your mom and dad went through, and you automatically get emotionally upset, and everybody's looking like what's going on? That doesn't have anything to do with you. But those are the type of things, which is why I do these videos. So he has, how many have we done? One, two, three, four, five, six. So he has two more. Let's see what he's saying, and then we'll come back for more questions.
Think about, or the concept of what our parents model about marriage and intimacy becomes our blueprint for it, which is like, ugh, that's a big thing that we need to kind of wrestle with and unravel, because we have to establish a new idea of healthy relationships, because that old blueprint is so compromised. So the thing to process with this one is, I think, mainly the concept of choosing sides, but also to process the heartbreak of having pa- some parents being labeled as bad or character assassinated, or that parent alienation sort of stuff, because it's like children are sort of set up for that sort of toxic loyalty stuff. And also,
Mm,
a recovery idea is to think about what kind of conversations did you need as a child from your parents if they were healthy about that divorce or introducing a step parent, and all that jazz. So, moving on, is number two is being a single parent. Um, Being a single parent when it's not by choice, I can't imagine how stressful that is. And I'm not saying that being a single parent is bad, but here are some examples where my clients who have had a single parent, where it becomes abusive. So it's when that the kid was the actual adult and it's an upside down thing, and the single parent was really more like the child. That there was codependency between the child and the parent because the parent treated the child as like a confidant, as more like a friend, as more like a sister, than it being sort of like I'm the adult parenting you. Um, Kids growing up in this will have to like make themselves totally selfless due to the stress of the parent being on their own. They are raising themselves, they are doing everything
Mm.
themselves, that kind of a thing. And even that stuff can be like just non-fault circumstance stuff. Often there are way too many sort of either boyfriends or girlfriends or step adults in this child's life without the parent really thinking about the impact of that on the child. um, that shows that a single parent might have lived in a very messy lifestyle or was potentially very immature and not protective. Even sadly, that the single parent may be extremely limited, and it's super hard to hold them accountable, meaning that the single parent is like, I don't know how to drive, I don't know how that works, I'm not doing anything like that, like really limited, and that the child would have to just make accommodations and figure out their life without those sort of basic sort of resources. Um, and this is hard, but I've often had clients who have a single parent and who made their child out to be like energy that's like, you ruined my life, that the child feels like
Oh.
such a burden, and that message is coming from that toxic adult from a place of intense blame, blaming them for their existence, which is brutal. Adults who grew up like this can exhibit, I call it like a superhero complex to cover up the shame, or they sort of were a superhero making everything happen for this parent, or making the system work. um, they will struggle with the void of the lost biological parent. It's rare that there was a connection there. They may feel like they struggle in life, feeling that they're a burden to everybody or everything is their fault. They may feel like they ruin people or ruin situations.
Mm.
They may really struggling with holding others accountable. And I think the thing to process this in your recovery or in therapy or whatever is that you didn't ask for that, and you didn't ask to be considered as a burden. Or you need to process the immense feelings of responsibility that shouldn't have been yours.
Mm. So what did y'all think about that one? That the single parent child. I know um, Pat said. Um, Let me go back to her. What really struck me with this one was it said the parent can sometimes make the child feel like they ruin their lives. So and I hear this a lot when you look like your dad or you look like your mom, and your parent had an issue with that mom or the dad, then you tend to get treated negatively in this single parent type of dynamic. I know Pat was saying she got a lot of stress from her single mother. Um, and then let's see. Michelle says she grew up in a toxic household. You want to share, Michelle? I don't know if you've heard a lot of the other things that we talked about, but this single parent thing is really important. And another thing he said about the single parent dynamic is that the parent treats the child as an adult, and then you're stuck missing out on your childhood. And I see this a lot in therapy as well, with that single parent just kind of making that child their friend, and then when the disrespects happen, then there's a whole different dynamic there. Um let's see where we at. Angela says my father was not a good dad, but bad mouthing him as a child did affect me in some ways, especially talking bad about his heritage. Okay, Angela, thank you for sharing that. So was it you had your mom and dad, or was it a single parent? Um, and so this one we said, I'm trying to make sure I get all the questions. You made the child feel like they ruined your life, treating the child as adult. Angela says, thank you. You just answered my question. My grandmother raised me and my brothers after she raised seven children. She was stressed and she loved me, but was totally disconnected from us. Wow, Angela. So that can bring in like the chaotic system, because your grandmother probably was so busy working and trying to take care of everything that she was just letting the household run automatically. and not a lot of emotions there, not a lot of connections. Thank you for sharing that. N- And then Karen says, in a friend's family, they had a cookout once, and two cousins got to arguing. One told the other that her dad wasn't her real dad. Oh, and it seemed everyone knew but her. It ripped the family apart. And that's that looks good on paper. You know, families, especially families of color, will hide all of this stuff just to look good on paper, just to look good for that church we go to, just to look good for all the church members. Um, and see, now y'all are giving these examples, and now you're seeing these toxic family systems. Because I think we hear the word toxic and we think it's just like somebody with a bad behavior or bad, but it's just the way we grew up into certain environments that kind of contribute to some of the ways we act. And Pat was agreeing with the single parent dynamic, saying agree. Nikita says yes. And Angela says my grandmother was single. Also, I believe she only gave what she could. Yes, probably so. She was trying to take care of all of y'all. So she was doing the best she could. Um, Pat says I look just like my dad. Oh, and did you get treated negatively for that, Pat? That's kind of back to that. Where was it? The single parent, yeah, treating you like a child, making the child feel um, like they ruin your life. Um, yeah, and then all of y'all looking like your dad. Pat says she looks like her dad. Kelly says she looks like her dad. Um, I look like my dad, and yes, you get treated negatively. Yeah, because I think what happens is there's a lot of leftover unresolved issues that happen between the parents, that that one single parent who's raising the kids kind of spills out their energy and negativity and stuff onto the children. I'm seeing that in a client I'm working with right now, and it's difficult for them to just to have good self-image, to understand. And so, and Pat says she was treated badly. And then Michelle says, my mother used to drink a lot, so I really got to do what I wanted, which allowed me to make a lot of wrong decisions. So, Michelle, you were in like a chaotic system, because you had a lot of stuff going on. The family was just kind of automatically running, and then uh, yeah, that's a lot. Kind of ships in the night, everybody just kind of going past each other. I'm trying to identify these things as I read them. Nikita says, here we go. So that was Michelle's first. I read that one. Okay, Nikita says, um, my mother allowed my little sister's dad to mistreat me while she always worked. So you had, again, that ships in the night, that chaos system where everything was just running on its own and nobody was really taking charge of the system. And that is why it's so important, I say, for families today, is to pay attention to what is happening in your household. Don't just let it run on its own, because there needs to be a balance of love, emotions, discipline. All of those things need to be happening. Everybody needs to be mindful at some time. That's why they used to stress back in the day, everybody's sitting down for dinner. Everybody's sitting down to do this one thing, so that at least we're getting together, connecting in some kind of way. Um, Michelle says, where we at? Sorry, guys. Okay, I read that one. But I have to say, Angela say she's at peace. Angela, because you probably processed all the stuff that you went through. And that's very, very possible. It's just people, when they're not aware that how these things can impact your life, you just go on with trying to make it. And then all of a sudden, this is what I tell my clients: things that we learn to do when we were children. We use those to cope, to make ourselves feel good when we were a child. But the problem happens is when we try to bring those things into adulthood and we try to use those same skills that we used as a child, it doesn't work. And that's when you start having, mental health stuff going on and trying to struggle and trying to figure out who you are. And so Karen says, yes, that family seemed to be mostly upset that me and the couple of outsiders had to hear the secret. Yeah, because again, we're going back to looks good on paper. You will maintain the image of this family, the perfection of this family at all costs. I don't care if we're all suffering. You will maintain this perfected family. This is we're talking about looks good on paper. Uh, Thank you for sharing that. Nikita says, hold on, let me put that up. Nikita says girls seem to always favor their dad and get punished for it. If that dad didn't treat mom right or mom felt some kind of way about that dad and didn't process that, you know, then she years and years and years she's holding that resentment. She's holding whatever happened. And then every time she looks at that child, that's what he says. That parent makes the child, and it could be the dad. It could be a reverse too. The dad can look at a child, a little girl, and she looks like the mom, and he just treats her like, um, But you treat the child as if they ruined your life because you're seeing your image of that person who hurt you. Good stuff, y'all. Michelle said, I lived with my dad first after my parents separated. I lived with him for 8 to 12 from ages 8 to 12, and he was never home. So me and my siblings took care of ourselves. Yeah, so that's the kind of ships in the night. And yeah, ships in the night. I think that's a good. I mean, because y'all were just kind of the system was just kind of working. And when I don't know if y'all were on here when I first started talking. When we say system, that is your family. It's a group of people that you call a family, and it is a system. It runs like a machine, and so when things aren't working, it impacts every member that's in that system. And that's when you go to a therapist, that's the first thing they're going to start asking you about is how was your family, how did y'all communicate, how did y'all handle conflict, how did y'all talk, did y'all express emotions, did y'all. And a lot of these things that he named, these 7 things, we haven't gotten to the last one yet. And we'll do that in a second. But for those who just came on, we talked about looks good on paper. That family is just trying to present perfection all the time, but they got a whole bunch of stuff going on behind the scenes. Ships in the night is where everybody's just in the home, but nobody's talking to each other. Nobody's helping each other. Nobody's dealing with each other. Then there's the anti-love family where there's no love being expressed. You try to be vulnerable, you're going to get teased. You don't trust a lot. There's a lot of just unable to communicate your emotions in that type of system. And then there's the chaotic system where you got boyfriends and girlfriends coming in and out the house. You got your mom gets married, she divorced, brings somebody else, gets married. It's just a whole bunch of chaos going on in that family. And that creates what he was saying, a lot of shame and guilt and not knowing how to have a relationship. And then the toxic divorce and loyalty is you have your kids choosing sides between the parents. They don't know how to trust. They don't know how they have intimacy issues. They're constantly choosing sides, and that's a struggle for them. It's almost like they don't know how to be. And then the single parent was the last one that we talked about, was parents treating the child as if they're adults sometimes, and then or they make the child feel like they ruined their lives. Okay, and then let's see what he has for the last one. Good stuff. Thank y'all for sharing and being vulnerable on here with um, your, background and stuff. So,
Number one, the final one, and then we're going to do an additional one after that, is probably the most common one. You guys are probably more familiar with this. Is what I call aggressor codependent. This one is very common, very familiar. One of the parents is rageful, violent, toxic, has some cluster B stuff going on or is substance addicted, and the other parent is codependent and doesn't protect or doesn't leave. And I know that that's loaded and I know that that's complicated, but this is just, I'm looking at that system from how I sort of see this. Some examples: the kids witness the codependent avoid or try to make things work even if that parent is being abused. So there's that witnessing of all that. Kids will take care of the codependent, and that codependent parent may allow that kind of caretaking to happen. The abusive or the aggressor usually holds things hostage, like the money, the job, the house,
Mm.
which is a really rageful kind of like really oppressive kind of system issue. The system is usually locked and dancing around the aggressor's feelings, and the codependent parent is probably teaching that dancing. Kids witness a toxic power struggle, like coming back to, if I ask a client, what did your parents model for you? This family is modeling that relationships are a power struggle or a hostage crisis or both.
Mm.
That's what I mean about that concept. And for adults who grow up in a system like this, they will struggle with trust. They most likely, what I see, hold a lot of internal rage about accountability, about people not being protective, that kind of a thing. They can find themselves in codependent relationships themselves. They can be very familiar with toxic people. They can be very triggered about not feeling protected or heard from their partner. Like that's where all the rage kind of goes that should be going to that codependent parent. And the thing to process, or some things to process in this one in your healing journey or recovery, is that it's usually the codependent parent that we're going to be needing to do most of the work on. We might see them as a victim, we might see them as a tragic figure, we might have seen them as sort of doing their best, but there is a lot of work to do with the safer parent, because it's almost like the aggressor is sort of a no-brainer. Hopefully that makes sense, meaning it's so like loud and obvious the person is sort of toxic that we don't need to kind of like figure it out so much. But there is a lot of wounding that happens with the aggressor. But again, most of my clients have to do their work, so a lot of work around the codependent parent.
Codependency. We often include as just a type of passive or needy person. So in this is the last one. In this type of family toxic dynamic, there's an aggressor and codependent. The aggressor is the one who handles the money, who's in control of everything, who puts fear in probably the whole family. And then the codependency, when someone's codependent, they depend on everything. They depend on their livelihood, everything, all of that stuff on that aggressor person. So, like he was saying, like if this type of person went to therapy, you're gonna probably need to work with the codependent person more because they've given up their power. They've lost trust. They've they feel like there's no protection. They're gonna struggle probably with relationships and things like that. So let's see what we got. Angela says, I remember taking care of family members who wouldn't get out of dysfunctional relationships. And for a long time, I was very withdrawn from being close with men because you saw the dysfunction, Angela. That's why I'm saying like things that we see growing up impacts the way we view relationships. That's why a lot of us struggle with relationships because we've never seen a healthy one. We've never seen a positive relationship, especially if you had a man in the house and he was an aggressor and mean and verbally and physically abusive, then you're always going to be timid with that. And then if you have a codependent mom or a codependent dad, you're going to take on, I've seen this happen in therapy, you take on that codependency and you're attached to people that mean you no good, and you just keep going back, keep going back, keep going back because you're looking for certain kinds of love. So that's the last type of family environment that he was talking about, aggressor and slash the codependent. And you got two people there, and so they're both kind of negative for each other, but they won't let go. And the codependent person is not going anywhere um, until something drastic happens, which is sad. So thank you for sharing that, Angela. Let's see. Karen says a chaos. No, no, no. Yeah. Karen says chaos system. TV shows depict the way that way too much in scripted shows, especially on reality shows. That's a good point. Yes, that's so much stuff going on, and then nobody's kind of taking control of the household and trying to figure out to make this a healthy environment. It's just everybody's just going back and forth, sleeping with this person, bringing another man around, and I do remember women always saying, you don't bring, strange men around your children. You don't bring strange women around your children. You get to know them first before, and that's what should happen. But as we can see in a chaotic system, chaotic family system, that's not happening. That the person is just bringing in whoever they fall in love with or whoever they're sleeping with at the moment, they're bringing them into the family system. So thank you for sharing that, Karen. Let's see. Angela says, and it made me never want to take care of an adult. I seen that happen to my family member, and he took complete advantage. Yes, telling you, we learn so much from. Okay, and Tanisha says, I was in a single parent home with my mother, who was the breadwinner, always working, and I've witnessed three failed marriages and feel that I don't want to get married because of the exposure to this. See, and this is exactly what this is kind of the chaos system, um, ships in the night, you know, you know, so and see how that has kind of changed your image of marriage because you've seen, those the negative images of marriage. And what I would suggest is going to therapy to see, you know, how to have a relationship. Because if you have that fear, marriage shouldn't be negative or be viewed as negative. You just have two people who probably didn't get to know each other or had a lot of issues going on with themselves and they never resolve them. But again, they let the child see it, and then that child shapes an image of what marriage is, and it puts a negative feeling in that person's mind about marriage. But thank you for sharing that. That is that's the point of this video right there, Tanisha, of what all of you guys are saying, because all of you were kids. All of you have experienced. I've had my own experience with like the verbal abuse stuff. So all of that kind of shapes the way we interact with people today. We're cautious. Sometimes we get upset and we don't realize it, but sometimes it's stuff that we've experienced in childhood and we kind of see it happening as an adult and we kind of run or get, excited about it or angry about it really quickly and can't really explain. But a lot of it is because we either came from a single parent family dynamic, a toxic divorce dynamic, anti-love environment, looks good on paper, ships in the night, chaos system. Um, but yeah, thank y'all for sharing all of the information. And Angela says, I'm learning to trust and put my guards down little at a time with relationships. Good. And that's sensible. Like you have to protect yourself um, because you don't know what you're getting. You don't know if you're dating somebody who came from a chaotic system. So all they know is, hey, just different relationships at different times of the year. That may be normal to them. And then you're trying to date them and trying to marry them and make it one on one, and they don't know how. That could be the conflict there. Or you're dealing with someone who came from an anti-love type of family and they don't know how to express love. They don't know how to say I love you. They don't know how to express emotions. So you're sitting there with this person trying to make a relationship, and you're like, do you even love me? Do you even like me? Because you never express it. I hear that so much in therapy. And then it looks good on paper. This is I can see where this is could be like verbal and physical abuse. You're in a toxic relationship, getting verbally abused or physically abused, but when y'all go out in public, he's holding your hand or she's holding your hand, and you're trying to make everything look good, but you have that toxic environment at home. Yeah, so a lot of good stuff here. So hopefully y'all got a lot out of this. I thought it was interesting when I found this. And Karen says I totally how that would affect you, Tanisha. And Angela's like, yes. But I do these videos just to highlight like some of the things that I see in therapy and some of the things that I've learned being a therapist, um, and how these types of things really do impact our adulthood, especially if they happen in childhood. But thank y'all for all sharing and being vulnerable with your stories. And yes, any questions? Anybody have any questions? I know I've kept y'all on here an hour, but this was good. Good stuff. Good. Thank you, Angela, for sharing a lot too. And I hope you feel better. So great. Great. Keep these things in mind. Share this video. The link for that full video is in the description. So if you want to go back and kind of listen to, it again one on one. But keep this in mind when you're dealing with people. Think, how your family system could actually impact the way you interact with everybody. Thank y'all saying great topic, great topic. Um, Michelle says, I think that's how I am. I do show my feelings a lot. I tell my kids every now and then I love them. I should tell them more, offer love them, but I do show affection to them. Yes, get in the habit. It's really hard for somebody who grew up in that anti-love family to kind of just say the word I love you to people or I care about you. Those things are really hard. It's like this weird feeling comes over you when you have to say it, and it's hard, but it came from childhood. If you weren't taught that, then it's hard. It's going to be hard to do. Um, yep, and I like that, Angela. It's progress and not perfection. That's a great way to leave this topic. None of us are perfect. We're all just striving to do the best with what we have and the way we grew up. And so that's why we have to give ourselves grace too. Like if you're having a bad day, it could be something triggered from childhood. If you're in a bad relationship or you're having a bad interaction with someone, it could be just from your childhood. Give ourselves grace. Tanisha says, I just wish I had my dad around me more than I did. Yes, Tanisha, how do you think that has impacted you as far as having relationships? Do you feel like, you know, if your dad was around, you could have saw like this healthy relationship? And because a lot of us, me included, don't know how to have a relationship. Like if things don't go the way that we think they should be in our head, then we think it's a problem. But maybe it's something that we need to. I always tell couples, and I've always said this on my show: if you're dating somebody, go to couples therapy, even at the beginning, because these things like this, if they came from one of these types of environments, you're going to have a problem and you may not even know why. If they came from an anti-love family, if they came from a family that ships in the night, guess what you're going to get? You're going to develop a ships in the night relationship where you're coming, they're going, you're coming, all of this stuff, you know, all of these things play a part in it. And that the guy who was presenting, he's a therapist, but he sees this. He said over 500 cases where these are the problems people are coming in to therapy with, and they're dealing with people who have experienced these things, or you experience them yourself, you know. And I think everybody probably experienced a little of all of these things. It's just when it's really, really big, that's when it's problematic. So I could go on and on and on and on and on. Uh, Angela says, I'm going to try couples therapy. Yes. Karen says, yes, grace is the gift that you can and should give yourself. Exactly. And oh, Angela, yeah, some men don't want to go. I see it all the time. They're wise to bring them into therapy sessions, but once they get there, it's good. You know, once they get there, they're comfortable. Because I think what it is just a lot of men probably came from anti-love families. They don't know how, they don't want to talk about, or looks good on paper. You don't share that stuff if you came from a family that is has the theme of looks good on paper. So just remember that. But all right, y'all. Great night. Thank y'all for sharing and being on here on your Friday night. I'm gonna give you your Friday night back, and I will talk to you in 2 weeks. All right, and we are out.